At the end of the day, all life has its ups and downs, and your bruises and your batterings every now and then. But at the end of the day, if I get run over tomorrow and I'm lying on the curbside, I'm not going to regret that I didn't try to do things that were passionate to me. And I'll probably lie there and, you know what, you've been privileged because you didn't have to spend your life wondering what would it be like to have a successful record, to tour around the world, to stay in certain hotels. You've been privileged. You're very fortunate.
What's up, everybody? It's Keefy at ghostcultmag.com. I am super stoked to be joined by the great band manager and music industry legend, Alan Niven. How are you today?
A little bashful about being called a legend. And also, there's something that triggers in my head that goes, yeah, manager, but I also did a lot of writing and produced some records that did quite well. So,
indeed.
In point of fact, I've had a very accidental and interesting time in music where there's hardly a thing that I haven't done. I even had a radio show once on WINC in Miami. So all kinds of things I've had to go at.
Definitely. Obviously, the book Sound and Fury is out now via Simon & Schuster imprint. And I had such a pleasure reading this book, and I made notes, and I have copious notes to pull from and so many things to unpack. But I think one thing that's very apparent to me is that you had a lifelong, and you will continue to have a lifelong love of music. Because if you didn't love music in the first place, I don't know that you would have found yourself in all these, situations and guiding and shaping kind of the soundtrack to an entire generation of music, if more than one, probably.
The fact of the matter is that music saved my life. It's allowed me not to be a working stiff. I didn't have to be an accountant. I didn't have to go to law school. I didn't have to go Sandhurst. And at about the age 17 or 18, I decided the way the world was going, it would be ridiculous to continue to be a conformist, do what the adults told me to do, and not have any fun. So at about 17 or 18, I decided, you know what? Music is so engrossing, so stimulating, so enchanting. That's the direction I'm going to go, because I want to spend my life playing rather than going through a working life. I find it odd when actors in interviews talk about the work, because it sounds so pretentious to me. It's like, you're not working, you're playing. Admit it, acknowledge it, appreciate it. At the end of the day, all life has its ups and downs, and your bruises and your batterings every now and then. But at the end of the day, if I get run over tomorrow and I'm lying on the curbside, I'm not going to regret that I didn't try to do things that were passionate to me. And I'll probably lie there and, you know what, you've been privileged because you didn't have to spend your life wondering what would it be like to have a successful record, to tour around the world, to stay in certain hotels. You've been privileged. You're very fortunate.
Indeed. I tell people all the time, it's the music business, not the music friendship. But if you can make some friendships along the way, that's always the best. I'm fascinated by your amount of recall and self-awareness, because I think a lot of people in the business historically don't have it.
But one thing I would remind you is when we talk about the music business, the first word is music. And the consistent problem that I think we all run into is where that nasty word business tends to take over ground where the word music stands. But ultimately, at the end of the day, the first thing is being in the studio and getting goosebumps when you hear somebody perform something really well. That's where the magic is. The rest of it, you endure. Jack Russell used to say to me, I don't get paid for being a singer. I get paid for the waiting around and all the other stuff. I sing for free. And that was Jack's attitude.
Definite, super interesting guy, and so many great stories about all the different bands you worked with, including Great White. I'm just amazed at some of the stuff you shared. And again, I imagine, I know you said you were reluctant to do the book for a long time, And I feel like it's a fast read, but it's very detailed. And like I said before, your recall is amazing. I don't know what I wore yesterday or ate for dinner, but like your recall of things 30 and 40 years ago and 25 years ago is amazing. I don't know if you ever kept a journal or a diary or this was in your mind, but some of these things are obviously burned into your DNA, these stories of your life here.
There are things that people have said along the way that scorched their way into my consciousness and have lived in my head for 30 years. They were unforgettable statements in extraordinary circumstance, and you tend not to lose that. The other thing was I was really busy. Grant, I don't think there are too many people who can claim that they had responsibility of working with two bands that broke almost simultaneously. Great White were just ahead of GNR to start with. And that was an awful lot of work. So an awful lot of work translates to, no, you're not going to chop lines and get fucked up tonight. You've got to be up and in the office, or you've got to be in your little box of an office underneath the condominium you live in, and you need to be on the phone because you don't have a receptionist, you don't have an assistant, you're doing it all. So get on with it and make sure you don't fuck up. And the make sure you don't fuck up was severely branded into me because we got Great White signed initially to a major label in 1983, and it turned out to be a disaster. One day you have the promise of we can make the world ours, and then a year later, nobody wants to know your name and have no interest in signing your band whatsoever, which I found incredibly stupid because we'd just spent a month in the UK with Whitesnake touring, 6 months on the road to Judas Priest. And let me tell you, that's a learning curve. So the band that was signed in 1983 was not nearly the band that got dropped at the end of 1984. We had learned a lot. We'd learned how to make a record and how not to make a record, for one thing. But, you know, the business thinks the way it does. And we were basically lepers then, very, very much. And I had to go to DIY and do another independent record to keep the band going, Shot in the Dark. But I was incredibly focused on the fact that chances come, hard won and hard fought for, but they can disappear even faster. So I was very, very concerned that we, one, get a second chance with the band, and two, we don't fuck up.
Yes, it seems like you saved a lot of situations teetering on the brink, and I'm sure that's part and due to your experience and partly due to your, you know, I would say moxie, temerity to hold on to things. I feel like I think maybe one of the most surprising things about the book is how much empathy you had for your artists. Like they were your responsibility. It wasn't just a check for you. You cared about a lot of these folks through their ups and downs, whatever they put you through. It seems like you were firm, but you were caring also when they needed support for whatever. And I think that's a misunderstood thing in management. I think we all have that image in our brain of, you know, Peter Grant or Don Arden or Smallwood, these names, right?
Wait. You threw out three names there, and they were all very different people. Now, you mentioned Rod Smallwood. I have nothing but gratitude and praise for Rod. I think Rod is one of the very best and a really good guy. The only thing with Rod is that I might suggest that he's kind of a one band, but on the other hand, look at what he's done with them. Absolutely incredible, which leads me on to the obvious observation is that management, an occupation where you roll in with your Starbucks at 10:30 in the morning, go and take a long lunch and disappear back to your condominium, you know, at 5 o'clock in the evening because you're going out for dinner, and maybe you might do a few phone calls in the interim period. Management, if you do it right, is a way of life. You live it. It's 24 hours a day, 365 a year. It's not something that you clock in and clock out of. That phone at any time, and if it rings at an unfortunate time, you know they're not calling you to tell you that you've just gone up 10 points in Billboard. You know that if that phone rings at 3 o'clock in the morning, you're going to be scrambling for bail money, most likely.
Right on. Yeah, that story about Jack in Sky Harbor International. I also had a run-in at Sky Harbor International once in Phoenix, and it wasn't pretty. Wish I would have had someone like you to come get me and tell me to shut up and get on with it. But, you know.
Oh my God, flying him home from Phoenix that night, he took his trousers down. It's one of those small jets where you had about 8 first class seats. Thank God it wasn't bigger. But he pulled his pants down 3 times on the way back to LAX. I mean, he was so out of it that I think the pilot took a calculation and figured it's Phoenix, LA. By the time I turn around and take him back to Phoenix, we'll be in LA. We might as well just go to LA. And of course, as soon as the door was open, I had him out of the door of the plane and up the companionway and out of sight as fast as possible. But he was totally out of it.
Right on. You know, so many things and so many directions to go in. You did have a very multifaceted career. Thank you for pointing that out at the start. Like I said, I think they're just like A&R. I feel like band management has been misunderstood. And you obviously learned on the fly how to negotiate and, you know, had experience, but also like, I can't imagine the range dealing with record labels, managers, getting yelled at by David Giffen in a restaurant in front of everyone, in front of Jane Seymour, or like, yeah. Wild. And you handle yourself. You know, you comported yourself in a way that made you, you know, you were firm when you needed to be for your bands, but also you were able to, you know, carry yourself a certain way. Have you always been that way, or did you learn to adapt?
There's no college for learning management, and the industry will never create one, because the establishment in the industry, the lawyer, the accountant, they prefer to have disposable management and inexperienced management because they're easier to deal with, they're easier to deceive, they're easier to hornswoggle, they're easier to take advantage of. So inherently, if you're in that role, you're going to learn from your mistakes, and you will make mistakes. At the essence of it all is the art of being cool is keeping it. Keep your head when others are losing theirs, because that, at the end of the day, is your responsibility. No matter what the crisis is, you've got to stay centered, you've got to stay calm, you've got to evaluate what's going on around you, and you've got to see if you can spot a solution in the circumstance. And that's your main responsibility with dealing with the negatives. But there are plenty of positives to deal with. You know, putting a show on the road and having 15,000 people leave a venue feeling like it was worth the ticket, and they had a sense of community, and they thought the band played really well and felt connected to them. That's magic. That's what you live for. It goes back to Jack's observation of, I sing for free. I get paid for all the rest of the crap.
If only more bands adopted that. Maybe that needs to be a new, you know, a new mantra for people. I know today it's a lot different. The onus is on a lot of bands. And like I said, I think A&R and management are largely misunderstood. And I don't know, you know, I don't know if you had a foresight to see that the labels were going to contract. You talked about, you know, returning to Capitol after your fallout with EMI. I love that you turned a guy's name into a verb. I'm not going to get Gary Gerst again. I'm going to let's make that a thing. And no, you know, no shade. You called yourself out as much as you called out anybody else. You know, so-and-so didn't like me. I didn't like them much either. Like very fair and even handed. It wasn't a book of you just bashing people or spilling dirty laundry. I think some of the stuff is commonly known. And I think some of it, you wouldn't know unless you were a fly on the wall in a lot of those circumstances with you. Yeah,
there's a degree of that. I mean, you know, when I'm sitting there thinking about it with a sense of objectivity, if you go onto a GNR forum, my GNR, whatever they're all called, which I really, really, really avoid doing as best I can, and almost completely manage to not see these things. But there have been moments of reference. And the thing that I've discovered is everybody knows everything. There's not that much that you can talk about that is going to surprise someone somewhere. I mean, the GNR sites know it all. It's extraordinary. It reminds me of when I first started going to Japan. The level of fandom there is just amazing. I mean, they know what I had for breakfast 3 years ago. They are that intent on knowing about that which they love. GNR fans are almost to that degree. There's really nothing that I talk about that isn't known in one way, shape, or another. But it's my way of telling it. If you were sitting in my kitchen, this is basically how I tell you the story, how it was seen through my eyes and through my experience. I tried to avoid writing for the fan. What I tried to do was write for the curious, the people who might spot the book in an airport and go, yeah, I'll give that a go. The committed fan knows all the information already.
Fair enough. Not to mention, there's no shortage of material. I'm interested to see if another, outside of Slash and Duff, if another member of GNR will ever write another book. I think Steven also had a book out at one point. Just out of curiosity, was it almost harder to keep Guns N' Roses growing versus breaking Great White for a second time, basically? I know those are, sort of similar. They were perpendicular arcs, they were kind of like, crossing purposes, and you were, managing both at the time. I feel like, Great White had like a second and a third, like a supernova, right? They kept going. And GNR had this incredible growth, and it wasn't immediate, right? You believed in the record, and that's why it got so big, and saved those tours that kept them on the road and promoting. But I wonder if it was almost harder to keep Guns N' Roses, until they took off the way you expected them to.
In 1987, given the character of rock radio in those days, I knew that I was going to have very little help from rock and roll radio as it was. I mean, it was, Bad Company, REO Speedwagon, Supertramp, etc., etc. And I felt that Great White would do better at rock radio than GNR would. And I was proved right. Rock Me became a hit in 87. I got no LA for GNR in 87. I mean, the irony is now you cannot go to and turn on a local radio today and not hear a GNR song during the day. It's omnipresent all the time. My perspective was, I thought that if I could do a reasonable job with GNR, what we might have is one of the best underground bands. I thought if we really worked on it, we might just get to go. With Great White, my sense of obligation was heavier, in that I thought, if I do this right, we should be able to get them to platinum state. The fact that if you take the analogy that GNR was a little backyard barbecue, some fucker came along with a 10-gallon drum full of kerosene and threw it on the barbecue. It blew up in our face, and it wasn't contrived, and it wasn't expected, and you cannot contrive the kind of response they got. And of course, I've had 30 years to analyze it and think about it. I've always seen rock and roll as primarily a working class, blue collar medium. I tend to think of things like pop music and disco as urban and middle class. But rock and roll to me was always more salt of the earth. When I was a kid, I wanted to meet a factory girl. I wanted to take my factory girl down and watch a Waterloo sunset, Ray Davies. That was my sense of who I would like to be with, because I felt that there was a more honest integrity to a working class state of mind than to the middle class state of mind in England that I'd experienced. So that's why I leant towards that. And rock and roll being fundamentally blue collar and working class, oh my God, did GNR get the most massive, wonderful, incredible response. Working class American kids. They looked at the band and they said, yeah, that's us. They speak for us. They speak for the value of every soul, including working class urchins from under the street.
Indeed, and I'm one of those guys. So a street guy that got out, but similar to those guys, yeah.
Is, to me, the critical creative element in the band, from my perspective. He had such an unimpeachable street vernacular that he crafted into his lyrics, and I always envied that. I loved the streetwise way that he wrote his lyrics and formed his lyrics within that idiom. Great writer, and an insane loss to the band. Idiotic that they lost him. I mean, what do we get after Izzy's gone? One Axl Rose solo record, and that's it, since 1991.
Yeah, it's definitely a different band without him, and you definitely let everybody know that Izzy was the person that kind of also was the balance for Axl, right? They trusted each other, they relied on each other, and once he was gone, I wonder, you pointed out in the book the exact moment you felt like Axl was asserting control, and Slash especially back down, and you expressed your disappointment in that moment, like, oh, this is going to change the course of the band forever. You didn't know at that point till a little later.
Wrong?
Not at all. Not at all.
Or was I right?
You were right. And then because you were right, Axl, had these grandiose visions, which I love a lot of those two records. I think it would have been better served as one great record instead of two occasionally great records. Occasionally, but he had these grandiose visions of Queen and Zeppelin.
Well,
the Stones.
That was definitely part of it. And, in terms of we all have our viewpoints and opinions, I will clearly state to you right now, I think Queen is one of the most overrated bands ever. Good God, what were they all about? And I'll tell you, the very first Queen thing I heard was a single called Keep Yourself Alive. And I thought that was great. And I was struggling at the time. And it spoke to me. And I thought that's a statement and an anthem that's going to make me feel better about what I'm going through right now. And it was all downhill from there, as far as I'm concerned. Bohemian Rhapsody, whatever. What the hell is that all about? So anyway, in terms of, I fully understand that he had grandiose visions of himself. I lived with it. And again, I'm going to say something that's probably going to make a lot of people crazy. November Rain was his masterpiece. To me, it's a little bit of a paint by numbers ballad. It's good. It's not the second coming of Stairway to Heaven, right? But it's good. So he has the grandiose ideas. And we held November, just to digress, we held November Rain over because he hadn't completed it and we needed some material to have in the larder for when we came back from the first album, to have something to build on. But there's something else. It wasn't just grandiose ideas. Can you imagine laying in bed, thinking to yourself, fucking Appetite, it sold 3 million. Fucking Appetite, it sold 5 million. Fucking Appetite, it sold 8 million. And you're lying in bed and you're going, how do we follow that? And part of Axl's thinking, and there was a sound logic to it that I could comprehend, there's going to be an absolutely impossible comparison of whatever we release to Appetite when whatever we release comes out. Okay, let's bury the fuckers. Let's put out a double album with so much material on it that they can't figure out a comparison to Appetite immediately and be dismissive. Let's overwhelm the fuckers. And I understood that. I also understood that putting out a double album, we were going to get trashed by the critics, excessive and grandiose. The economics of it scared me because you're looking at a record that's going to cost, say, $30 instead of a single album that's $15. And we have, as we've talked about, a blue collar following. $30 might be quite a buy in the groceries to buy a double album. And we've got a blue collar following. Goddamn Trump may get into a limo with a bunch of models and drive down to Tower on the night of the album release to buy them all copies of the record. But we are not a Trump audience. We're a Trump audience. The people who love Trump would love Guns N' Roses to a large degree. But we're not making a record for somebody like Trump and his models. So I was very, very apprehensive about doing a double album. But I sat Axl down and I said, listen, let's do something Guns N' Roses. Instead of putting out a double album, let's put out 2 single albums. Who's ever done that before? Isn't that rather Guns N' Roses? Isn't that beautifully over the top our way? And by the way, here are the economics. If we put out 2 single albums, the economics for the band and the record company are way superior than putting out 1 double album. It works out better. Of course, the honest thing is there's no such thing as a genius, inspirational idea. There are only those things that you saw in the past and you filed away and you remembered when it became something that could be relevant to you. What I was remembering was Electric Ladyland, which when it was released in the United Kingdom came out as a double album, but Polydor also sold it as 2 single albums at the same time. And that's where I stole that idea from. But
nice work.
Yeah, nobody remembered, and we could say, oh, it's just the Guns N' Roses way to do things. But in point of fact, I stole it completely from Jimi Hendrix.
Amazing. One of the things that struck me about the book and about your story is that you didn't just care for these artists, but you really advocated for them. And I think that's maybe a misunderstood facet of management that, aside from your personal stake in their success or failure, you really went to bat for artists, gave free advice, the way you got Clarence Clemens royalties, even though you ended up not working with him long term after that. Things like that, I think, are very unheralded and really blew me away.
I never saw a dime for all the time I spent with Clarence. And once Izzy left the band and he asked me to manage him, I never saw a dime there either. It didn't concern me that much. I wasn't in it for the guarantee of a payment at a certain time. The very first year I worked with GNR, I never saw a dime then too. In something like October, November of 1987, Izzy went over to their then accountant to find out how much I'd taken out and how much I'd been paid. I was freaking horrified to find that it was zero. Not a single penny had I been paid in a year of working for GNR. And the fact is, he was embarrassed by that, and a check arrived from the accountant very soon after his visit. The fact of the matter was, we were on tight budgets. They needed to be, their bodies and souls needed to be kept together. I could get by. You play the long game. And of course, in the long game, when you finally get to the point where it's going to pay off, Axl says, I can't work with you anymore. And you go, oh, okay, whatever. If I may be so bold, what we have here is failure to appreciate.
Nicely done. Great reference, and I love that's also like one of my favorite Gun songs. But I don't know if you don't seem bitter, but you've had some letdowns over your career. Is there any record that you work, if you'll really permit me? Oh, go ahead.
Don't lose your thought. Really simple before I lose my thought. And you have the advantage. You're younger, you're smarter than I am. I'm old, I've got holes in my brain. If you carry anger within yourself, it's like taking poison and expecting the other person to die. It's not healthy. My house is full of Buddhas to remind me to relax, stay centered, and don't get so upset about things. Take the Confucian point of view. Confucius say, he who patiently sits on the riverbank will eventually see the body of his enemy float by. Now that's a little bit negative, but I get the point. Like, don't throw gasoline onto embers, let the embers die out. As I said, not bitter, privileged. I mean, that was an extraordinary period of my life where I had extraordinary experience that comes to very few people. I appreciate that. Didn't stop me loving making music, didn't stop me loving writing songs, didn't stop me enjoying collaborating with people. Still do that.
Right on. I was going to ask also, on one hand, thank you for that. If you had a record you appreciate less now because of the external things, whether you were with the producer or the manager, do you have a record now that you don't like anymore because of any extracurricular things? Opposed to the music?
I live in Arizona. I've got a nice little stereo in the truck. If I turn it onto a radio station, I know I'm going to hear something that I worked on within the day. When I come home, I'm not going to play those records. I'm not going to listen to them. And yes, emotionally, for example, I don't think I even have a copy of Use Your Illusions in the house. I won't play it. I love Dust and Bones. It's one of my favorite Izzy songs. Love that song. But will I pull out an album and have Axl's voice bouncing off the walls of my home for an hour and a half? No, thank you.
Well noted. Do you have a favorite record you worked on ever? Like one single piece of music that you're happy and proud to have. I'm sure most of the big ones, but like, is there a singular moment that like this is my proudest moment as either a collaborator, writer, producer, or manager?
The songs I feel best about are the ones that have yet to be recorded. Some of them have been written quite a while ago. In fact, just this morning, I sent a demo of one of the songs to somebody I hadn't heard from in 30 years. I thought, I'm just going to pick that song and send it to him and see how he responds. As a general rule, those things that have not yet been recorded are the things that I get the most pleasure out of. And those things that have been recorded, it depends on my mood and circumstance, how I feel about it. Sometimes I'll go, fuck, I don't want to listen to that. And then sometimes I'll go, it's not bad. We did all right. That's okay. Stuff that is excellent and already exists definitely depends on my mood and circumstance. But
Well played.
I can always get enthusiastic to work on something that hasn't been realized yet. But you can hear the form, hear the content, have the ideas in your head. That I will get excited about all the time.
Right on. I wonder, I feel like we're getting to the age where our heroes are leaving us. And I don't personally think there's going to be a next or another GNR, Metallica, or Maiden. We have some very great bands these days. I don't see how it's possible. The industry has changed dramatically. But I was wondering if there was any band from the last bunch of years that you saw that maybe has some of that spark those other bands had.
There have been one or two people that I've worked with where I definitely had a sense of conviction and belief in their potential. One was a group of really young guys from Dallas called 383. And they were so determined to get my attention. They loaded themselves in a van and they drove all the way from Dallas to where I live in Arizona, in Prescott. And that's a drive. And they played in a little bar here in town. And that captivated me. That really did. That sense of determination. Everybody else I was with at the bar said, don't see it there. You're not going to work with these guys, are you? You're kidding me. But there was something about them, and I went to Texas and spent a little time with them. We did some pre-production, we did an initial recording, and then we did a better recording. And by that stage, I decided that the front man was one of the best front men I'd seen. The guitar player was really good, and I had a clear, simplistic vision. ZZ Top, Pantera, they go right down the middle. So we've got guitar scapes. We've got really strong vocals. There are no guarantees in life. The singer died of cancer, went down with it, and was gone pretty quickly. And dealing with those kind of things is, one of the hardest things in life, because if you've got any sense of spirituality or a higher power, you sit there and go, what the fuck? Why did he have to go and die? What is the point? No guarantees in life. So that was one band. There was some older guys in Phoenix called Razor who made an industrial rock and roll record, which I could not listen to. My wife made me listen to the whole thing. And the final track, and when I say the whole thing, she'd play 30 seconds of a track and I'd go, next. She'd play 30 seconds of the next track, next. And we got to the final track and I'm going, God, you're a persistent woman. And suddenly I'm listening to something and going, oh, hello, wait a minute. Now we're talking. And if I remember correctly, it was them covering When the Levee Breaks. And immediately that was the door that opened for me for Razor. I went, let's get rid of the industrial, hard, digital bullshit sound. Let's make it sound organic. Let's minimize the processing of signals. Let's get a feel into this. And let's find out what this singer can really do. And I went down to the bass player's house one day, and this huge guy comes rolling up on a Harley, where everything on the Harley was black. Every screw, every lead, that entire thing was pure, perfect. And he gets off this bike, and he's a big guy. And I'm going, oh, I'm going to tell this guy how to sing. Let's see how this works out. So I pulled him back into the sunroom, and I sat him down, and I said, okay, what do you sing in the shower? He kind of looked at me. I said, you want me to sing? I said, yeah, I want you to sing into my face right here, right now. And I want you to sing what you sing in the shower. And he started singing Marvin Gaye, and I could hear the quality of his voice immediately. I thought, oh my God, you can sing like Marvin Gaye, and they've got you sounding like some industrial machine. Oh no, we're going to record something that brings out this voice. And we made a really good record. It got ignored. No one would pick it up. And it's a real quality record if you can find it.
Excellent. I'll definitely look that up. Out of curiosity, just because we're recording this on the eve of this, speaking of not likely to see their likes again, this farewell Black Sabbath and Ozzy concert on this weekend. I know you're very fond of Ozzy, and I love that recollection story of him on the plane with you. Any thoughts? I'm nervous. I wouldn't want the pressure of like, here's the last thing we ever do. I love the band and I love Ozzy solo, of course, and I think the spectacle of it is going to be exciting and interesting. But I would hate the last thing. Robert Plant always talked about Live Aid, like they gave Jimmy his guitar untuned out of the case, and then here we go. Why do we do this? Why do we say yes? So I'm fearful of that. But what are your thoughts on bands doing so? Is this going to be something we're going to be cursed with in the future, where every band tries to do this?
Ozzy has a manager who is quite capable of hammering on anyone. And there are those who are going to be at that gig who are not going to disappoint and piss off the manager. So they're going to do their job well. And the reason why I go down that track is that it's across your mind that maybe it's a relief for Ozzy, that I get the opportunity to bow out in my own hometown, and I don't have to do this anymore because my physical condition is such that I cannot do this anymore, and I don't want to be embarrassed on stage because of my physical condition. I would say for Ozzy, it's a fucking relief that he can do it in style and have all those people surround him on that day and acknowledge it. Now, for me, being a heretic, I fight with the wife who loves fairies wear boots and loves to try and kick my ass with her boots on. And I look at her and go, your damn band is a one-hit wonder. It's all about Paranoid. That song is it for me. Because when I was, 17, there were 2 tracks that were running through my consciousness all the time. One was Paranoid, and the other one was Speed King, Deep Purple. Oh my God, did I love to hear those 2 tracks.
I just did a podcast of a writer of ours who has his own platform, and we were talking about classic rock bands and things. And I said that Deep Purple, as many hits as they had, they really, I think, maybe opposite of Queen. Queen has hits and no great albums. I did a whole podcast series on this. Believe me, I listened to 9 to 13 Queen albums, and my partner wants to choke me out the next time he sees me in person. But I think Deep Purple actually had incredible, deep albums with no skips, not just the hits, not just Hush and Woman Tokyo and things.
Deep Purple and rock. Thank you. Good night.
Yeah.
They could have retired after that.
Yep.
I mean, they hit an apex there. The extraordinary thing for me, too, is that if you put me in a position of saying, you can choose one Led Zeppelin album, which one do you think I'd choose?
That's a tough one. I'll take a gander and say Physical Graffiti, since it's the anniversary year.
Nope. The first one.
Okay.
Zeppelin 1 is monumental to me still to this day. The vibe, the space, because it's minimalist, the size of the instruments in the mix. That's a record, you put it on and I go, I'm captivated. I'm there. I'm with it all the way through. And I'm enjoying it on a simplistic level. I used to drink once upon a time. I might have had a drink or 2 with it. At the same time, my brain is always going, my studio brain, and I'm analyzing exactly what was recorded and what wasn't recorded, and how much space there was around this instrument, and how much space there was in the entire mix, and the dynamics all the way through. That, to me, if you can only take one Zeppelin album, take the first one.
Right on. Surely the best rhythm section I ever heard in my life. Jonesy and Bonham, for sure. So many things I want to...
Bonham, Bonnie. I mean, just fucking amazing. Do you know he was the only band member who's not afraid of Peter Grant?
That sounds right. I wouldn't want to meet that guy in a dark alley. Young John Bonham, full of life and beer. Yeah. I wouldn't want to mess with him.
Yeah.
All that wrist power, I'm sure he could punch a dude.
Yeah, he could.
For sure. There's so many things I would want to ask you, given longer time, but I want to be respectful of your day, and I'm sure you have other things to do.
It's not respectful of the day. It's I have a calendar. You go to do this then, this then, this then. But what I will say is, if you get the notion and the inclination and want to have a subsequent chat, without a back end closing us off, you're very welcome to call me up and say, let's have a chat about something.
That's very, very kind of you. Thank you. I always like to end with a wild card question. And so my wild card question for you today is this, which is, if you could go back and meet your younger self, what piece of advice would you go and give yourself, if any, before you started on this path?
Trust no one.
Care to elaborate? That was it. Just trust no one.
Trust no one.
Interesting.
And if you read the book, there are some hints in there as to why I would trust no one. And the no ones I would not want to trust.
Indeed. Once Bitten, Twice Shy in real life. It's not just a great album or a song.
Right.
It's actually good advice.
Yes, it is.
Alan Niven. Sound and Fury is out now on via Simon & Schuster. Thank you so much for this chat today. I learned a lot. I laughed a lot. Thank you for everything.
Well, the appreciations are actually mine for, one, reading the book, and two, giving me an opportunity to talk about it. Thank you very much for doing that. And if you're inclined at some point that you'd like to have a longer chat that we have no time limit on, by all means, let me know. It'd be a pleasure. It's been great to meet you.
Same here. Thanks so much. We'll do it again soon.